100 engineers stood defeated by a silent German steel, their degrees worthless against the machine's stubborn refusal to run. Then Scarlett Webster set down her mop, placed her bare hands on the metal, and in 10 impossible minutes, everything the world believed about intelligence was about to shatter. Hi, my beautiful family! If you are enjoying this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video and comment where you are watching from. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories. And trust me, you won't want to miss them. Now, let's continue. Scarlett Webster crouched beside a washing machine in her bright yellow sweater, her dark hands moving across the metal housing with the tenderness of a mother checking her child's fever. It wheezed like a dying animal in apartment 3B of the Corktown complex. She didn't understand why she knew what she knew. Her fingers simply fix things. Mrs. Patterson, your drain hose is kinked behind the unit, she called through the thin wall. And the belt's about to snap. Give me 5 minutes. Scarlett had never taken a mechanics class, never owned a repair manual, but understood engines like the back of her hand. The washing machine's problem felt obvious as hunger, a twisted tube choking the water flow, rubber stretched past its breaking point. Her hands found the access panel without looking. How'd you know that, honey? Mrs. Patterson's voice carried through the wall, mixed with her baby's crying. The repairman said it needed a whole new motor. Scarlett's jaw tightened. Repairmen always say that to women living alone, especially black women in buildings like this one, where the walls were thin and the rent was cheap and nobody expected a mechanical genius to live in any of the apartments. She straightened the hose with practiced ease, her movements sure despite the cramped space. The machine hummed back to life, its rhythm steady and strong. Mrs. Patterson's baby stopped crying as if the mechanical harmony had soothed him too. Thank you, Scarlett. What do I owe you? Nothing. Scarlett wiped her hands on her jeans. Just being neighborly. But neighborly didn't pay bills. At 26, she'd been supporting herself since 17, when Grandma Rose died and left her alone with nothing but this gift that felt more like a curse. Companies wanted degrees, certificates, proof on paper that you knew what you were doing. They didn't care that you could hear a transmission's death rattle from 3 blocks away. Scarlett checked her reflection in the building's lobby mirror before stepping into the cold Detroit morning. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, no fancy styling. She wore her best outfit, the yellow sweater and dark slacks she'd bought at Goodwill for occasions that mattered. Today mattered more than most. The bus ride to Pollard Industries took 47 minutes through neighborhoods that told Detroit's story in abandoned lots and stubborn gardens. Scarlett pressed her forehead against the window, watching the city wake up around her. Factory workers heading to early shifts. Children waiting for school buses. People building lives with whatever tools they had. She'd been one of those factory workers until last month, when the plant closed and took 600 jobs with it. Now she sat with a folded newspaper clipping in her pocket, a help-wanted ad for an entry-level engineering position that might as well have been written in a foreign language. Seeking motivated engineer with bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering or related field. Experience with industrial machinery preferred. Competitive salary and benefits. Scarlett had no degree, no certificates, no experience that would look impressive on paper. But she had something else. Something that made her different from every other applicant who'd walked through Pollard Industries' doors today. She could fix things nobody else could fix. 25 miles away in Bloomfield Hills, Sean Pollard adjusted his navy tie in the mirror of his master bathroom. At 38, he'd built a comfortable life on the foundation of good decisions and better connections. Stanford MBA. 6 years climbing the corporate ladder at his father's manufacturing company. A house in the right neighborhood. A wife who understood the importance of appearances, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing the rules of success. His reflection showed a man who belonged in boardrooms and country clubs. Short brown hair perfectly styled. Clean-shaven jaw that projected authority. Eyes that had learned to assess people quickly and file them into appropriate categories. Today he'd conduct 12 interviews for the engineering position. He already knew who he'd hire. Trevor Richards, son of a family friend, fresh out of Michigan with excellent grades and the right pedigree. The other interviews were just process, covering bases to satisfy HR requirements. Sean reviewed the resumes over coffee in his kitchen, windows overlooking manicured lawns that someone else maintained. Most applications were standard, recent graduates with decent GPAs, a few experienced engineers looking for better opportunities. One resume made him frown. Scarlett Webster. No degree listed. Previous employment at a factory that had closed. Address in Corktown, one of Detroit's rougher neighborhoods. The cover letter was handwritten, in neat cursive that spoke of someone trying too hard to make an impression. I know I don't have the education you're looking for, but I can fix your machines better than anyone. If you'll give me a chance to show what I can do, I won't disappoint you. Sean almost laughed. Show what she could do. This wasn't a trade school or community college workshop. Pollard Industries manufactured precision equipment for automotive companies across the Midwest. Their engineers needed to understand complex systems, read technical drawings, communicate with clients who expected expertise. What could someone without even basic credentials possibly offer? He set her resume aside, then paused. Company policy required interviewing all applicants who met basic qualifications, and technically she had listed relevant work experience. It would be a short conversation, 15 minutes to explain why formal education mattered, then move on to serious candidates. Sean finished his coffee and gathered his papers. Outside, his BMW started with the purr of German engineering at its finest. The drive to the office would take 30 minutes through suburbs where success looked identical. Large houses, newer cars, people who'd learned to play the game correctly. He had no idea that in 47 minutes, a woman named Scarlett Webster would walk into his building and change everything he believed about intelligence, talent, and who deserved a seat at the table. The morning sun climbed higher over Detroit, casting long shadows that would soon shift and change, just like the assumptions both of them carried toward their inevitable collision. The interview lasted exactly 14 minutes. Scarlett sat across from Sean Pollard in a conference room that smelled like leather and disappointment. Her yellow sweater felt too bright under the harsh lights, her handwritten resume pathetically thin beside the neat stack of printed applications on his desk. Miss Webster. Sean's voice carried the polite distance of someone going through motions. I see you worked at Morrison Manufacturing before they closed. Yes, sir. 5 years on the floor, mostly troubleshooting equipment problems. Scarlett's hands stayed folded in her lap, fighting the urge to fidget. When machines broke down, they called me to figure out what was wrong. And what exactly did that involve? Listening. Watching. Machines tell you things if you pay attention. She leaned forward slightly. Like that compressor unit outside your window. It's running hot. Probably needs new coolant lines before it fails completely. Sean glanced toward the window without interest. Miss Webster, engineering at this level requires extensive technical knowledge. Thermodynamics, materials science, computer-aided design. Do you have experience with any of these areas? The words felt like doors slamming shut. Scarlett's throat tightened. No, sir, not the book learning part. But I can fix things. I can solve problems that stump other people. I'm sure you're very capable in your field. His tone suggested her field was somewhere far below his consideration. But this position requires a degree, preferably in mechanical engineering. We work with complex industrial systems that require theoretical understanding, not just hands-on experience. Scarlett felt heat rise in her chest. What if I could prove it? What if you had a machine that wasn't working right, and I could show you what I can do? Sean's eyebrows rose slightly. The audacity was almost amusing. Miss Webster, we don't have time for demonstrations. We need qualified engineers who can hit the ground running. But how do you know I'm not qualified if you won't let me show you? The question hung in the air between them. Sean studied her face, seeing desperation beneath the determination. Something twisted in his chest, not quite sympathy but not complete indifference either. Look, Miss Webster. He stood, signaling the interview's end. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but we have standards to maintain. Our clients expect engineers with proper credentials. Scarlett remained seated. So that's it? You won't even give me a chance. I'm sorry. The position requires a bachelor's degree minimum. She stood slowly, gathering her purse and the hope she'd carried through 47 minutes on the bus. At the door, she turned back. "Mr. Pollard, that compressor really is going to fail. Probably within the week." Sean barely looked up from his papers. "Thank you for coming in." Scarlett walked through the gleaming lobby of Pollard Industries, her yellow sweater now feeling like a beacon of failure. The security guard nodded politely as she passed. Outside, Detroit's April wind cut through her clothes with promises of rain. She'd made it halfway to the bus stop when she heard footsteps behind her. "Miss Webster, wait." Sean caught up to her in the parking lot, slightly out of breath. Something had shifted in his expression, though she couldn't read what. "I may have been too hasty," he said. "We do have another opening. Not engineering, but it's steady work with benefits." Scarlett's heart jumped before caution could catch it. "What kind of work?" "Janitorial services. Night shift. Mostly. It's not what you applied for, but—" He shrugged, the gesture designed to look generous rather than condescending. "It gets you in the building. Who knows what opportunities might come up." The offer hit her like cold water. Janitorial work. Mopping floors in the building where real engineers designed the machines she could fix with her eyes closed. The humiliation burned in her throat. But Grandma Rose's voice whispered in her memory, "Baby, sometimes you got to take the long way to get where you're going." "What's the pay?" she asked quietly. $12.50 an hour. Health insurance after 90 days. $12.50 was barely enough for rent and groceries, but it was more than unemployment provided. And he was right about one thing. It got her in the building. Around the machines. Near the people who worked on problems she could solve. "When would I start?" "Monday night. 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. Sean handed her a business card. "Call HR to set up paperwork." Scarlett took the card, its smooth surface foreign between her calloused fingers. "Thank you. Don't thank me yet. It's hard work." She almost laughed. Hard work was watching your parents die in a car crash caused by mechanical failure you were too young to prevent. Hard work was dropping out of school to care for a dying grandmother. Hard work was being brilliant in a world that only recognized intelligence when it came with proper papers. Mopping floors would be easy compared to burying her gifts for the chance to someday use them. "I'll take it," she said. 6 months later, the German precision machinery dominated the center of Pollard Industries' main production floor like a sleeping giant. Imported at a cost of $8 million, it was designed to manufacture automotive components with tolerances measured in thousandths of an inch. When it worked properly, it could produce parts for 3 major auto manufacturers simultaneously. When it didn't work, everything stopped. Scarlett had been cleaning around the machine for 6 months, watching engineers fuss over its temperamental moods during day shifts. She knew it sounds better than her own heartbeat, the whisper of pneumatic actuators, the precise rhythm of cutting tools, the subtle vibration that meant bearings were wearing thin. She also knew it was about to die. The machine's death rattle started at 6:47 a.m. on Tuesday morning, October 29th. Scarlett was emptying trash bins near the production line when the giant shuddered once and fell silent. Emergency lights began blinking. Alarms chimed softly. By 7:30 a.m., day shift engineers surrounded the machine like doctors around a critical patient. Carter Christian, the lead engineer, ran diagnostics on his tablet while Mac Keith checked electrical connections. Neither looked confident. "Error codes aren't making sense," Carter muttered. "Shows normal operation on all systems." "Could be a sensor malfunction," Mac suggested. "Or maybe the control software crashed." Scarlett continued mopping nearby, invisible in her gray uniform. She'd learned to move around the engineers like furniture, present but unnoticed. They spoke freely in front of her, assuming janitors didn't understand technical problems. But she understood everything. The machine wasn't showing normal operation because the problem wasn't in the computer systems. It was deeper, older, something that had been building for weeks while the engineers focused on digital readouts instead of listening to what the machine was trying to tell them. By noon, Pollard Industries had called in reinforcements. 20 local engineers arrived with their tools and theories. They tested circuits, replaced components, updated software. The machine remained stubbornly silent. Wednesday brought 30 more experts, including specialists from the original German manufacturer. They spoke in technical terms that impressed the executives but accomplished nothing. Each failed diagnosis cost time and money that the company couldn't afford to lose. Thursday morning, Sean Pollard stood in his office looking down at the production floor through windows that needed cleaning. Orders were backing up. Clients were asking questions. His father was making phone calls that started with phrases like, "What the hell is happening down there?" The machine had defeated 70 engineers in 3 days. By Friday afternoon, desperation had settled over Pollard Industries like factory dust. They'd flown in 30 additional specialists from Germany, the machine's birthplace, men with decades of experience and engineering degrees from prestigious universities. 100 engineers. One silent machine. 0 solutions. Scarlett finished her shift Friday night and went home to her apartment in Corktown, where Mrs. Patterson's baby was crying again and the washing machine hummed with mechanical contentment. She lay in bed listening to the sounds of the city, thinking about the machine that had stumped 100 brilliant minds. She knew exactly what was wrong with it. Saturday morning, Sean stood before the executive board in the conference room where he'd interviewed Scarlett 6 months earlier. The men and women around the polished table wore expressions of barely controlled panic. "The machine has been down for 4 days, said board member Anai Glover. "We're losing $30,000 every hour of downtime." "Our biggest client is threatening to pull their contract," added Trevor Richards, the engineer Sean had planned to hire before settling for someone with actual credentials. "What do the experts say?" asked another board member. "They're baffled." Sean's voice carried the exhaustion of a man watching his career crumble. 100 engineers, and nobody can even identify the problem. "Then we need to consider our options," Anai said grimly. "Replacement machinery will take months to order and install. We might be looking at plant closure." Sean stared out the window at the silent production floor. 100 experts had failed. His company was hemorrhaging money. His reputation was circling the drain. And somewhere in the building, a woman in a gray uniform was getting ready for another night of mopping floors around the machine she could fix in 10 minutes. If only someone would let her try. The Monday morning sun rose over Detroit, casting long shadows across the factory floor where the fate of Pollard Industries hung in the balance. In 12 hours, everything would change. But first, Scarlett Webster had to find the courage to speak up. Scarlett's hands trembled as she pushed her cleaning cart past the silent German machine. The production floor felt different at night, empty of the 100 frustrated engineers who had spent the weekend staring at diagnostic screens and scratching their heads. Emergency lighting cast long shadows across the factory floor, making the $8 million piece of equipment look like a metallic monument to failure. She stopped beside the machine and set down her mop. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she placed her palm against the cold steel housing. The metal felt wrong under her touch, like a fever that had broken but left the patient weak. "What are you trying to tell me?" she whispered. The answer came not in words but in the mechanical intuition that had guided her since childhood. The problem wasn't in the computer systems or electrical connections. It wasn't in the pneumatic actuators or cutting tools. It was deeper, hidden in the machine's heart where metal met metal in precise harmony. A bearing assembly. Third-stage drive system. The German engineers had installed it incorrectly during the original setup 6 months ago, creating microscopic misalignment that had slowly worn the components beyond tolerance. The machine was protecting itself by shutting down before the damage became catastrophic. Scarlett could fix it in 10 minutes. Maybe 15 if she took her time. She pulled her hand back as if the metal had burned her. The knowledge sat in her chest like swallowed glass, sharp and impossible to ignore. But what could she do with it? March into Sean Pollard's office and announce that she, a janitor with no credentials, had solved the puzzle that baffled 100 engineers? They'd laugh her out of the building. Or worse, they'd think she was crazy. Scarlett returned to mopping, her movements automatic while her mind raced. She'd spent 6 months in this building, invisible in her gray uniform, watching engineers struggle with problems she could solve with her eyes closed. Every night brought new frustrations as she cleaned around their failures, biting her tongue until it bled. But this was different. This machine represented jobs for 300 people. Orders worth millions of dollars. The company's survival hung in the balance, and she held the answer in her calloused hands. The sound of footsteps echoed across the empty factory floor. Scarlett looked up to see Sean Pollard walking toward her, his usually perfect appearance disheveled from days of crisis management. His tie hung loose around his neck, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Working late?" he asked, stopping near the machine. "Yes, sir. Just finishing this section." Scarlett kept her voice neutral, professional. The distance between them felt vast as an ocean. Sean stared at the silent machine with the expression of a man watching his career die. 6 months ago, this was going to revolutionize our production capabilities. Now it's an $8 million paperweight. Have the engineers figured out what's wrong? The question slipped out before Scarlett could stop it. No. His laugh held no humor. 100 of the best minds in the industry, and nobody can even identify the problem. Error codes show normal operation. All systems check out perfectly. He rubbed his forehead. My father built this company from nothing. 40 years of work, and I'm about to lose it all because of one machine. Scarlett's throat felt tight. The answer burned inside her like acid, demanding release. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. What could she possibly say that wouldn't sound ridiculous? Maybe. She stopped, courage failing. Maybe what? Nothing. Just thinking out loud. Sean turned to look at her, really look at her, for the first time since that interview 6 months ago. You're the woman who applied for the engineering position. Yes, sir. Scarlett Webster. The name came back to him slowly. You said something about the compressor unit during your interview. Said it would fail. Did it? 3 days later. Exactly like you predicted. His eyes narrowed slightly. How did you know? Scarlett's heart raced. This was her moment, her chance to bridge the gap between knowing and proving. But the words stuck in her throat like broken glass. 6 months of invisibility had taught her the price of speaking up when nobody wanted to listen. Lucky guess, she said instead. Was it? Sean stepped closer, studying her face in the emergency lighting. You've been cleaning around this machine for months. Have you noticed anything unusual? The question hung between them like a lifeline thrown to a drowning woman. Scarlett could grab it, could tell him about the bearing assembly and the misalignment and the simple fix that would save his company. She could risk everything on the chance that desperation might make him listen where opportunity had failed. But she'd been rejected before. Dismissed. Treated like her intelligence didn't matter because it didn't come with proper paperwork. I'm just the cleaning lady, she said quietly. I wouldn't know anything about machines that complicated. Something flickered across Sean's face, disappointment or relief, she couldn't tell which. He nodded and walked away, leaving her alone with the silent machine and the knowledge that could save them all. The emergency board meeting convened at 7 a.m. in the same conference room where Scarlett had been rejected 6 months earlier. Sean sat at the head of the polished table, facing 12 board members whose expressions ranged from concerned to openly hostile. 4 days of downtime, said board member Guillermo Moss, his voice sharp with frustration. Our biggest client is already talking about finding alternative suppliers. The German specialists left this morning, Anai Glover added. 30 of their best engineers, and they're completely stumped. They're recommending we replace the entire machine. At what cost? Demanded another board member. $8 million for new equipment, plus 6 months for delivery and installation, Sean replied. We'd lose every major contract we have. Then we need other options, Guillermo said. What about hiring additional experts? Maybe someone from Japan or Switzerland. We've already consulted with engineers from 6 countries, Sean said. Nobody has answers. This is insane, burst out Trevor Richards, the young engineer Sean had originally intended to hire. One machine cannot defeat the entire global engineering community. There has to be something we're missing. Sean thought about his conversation with Scarlett the night before, about the compressor failure she'd predicted with impossible accuracy. But suggesting they consult with a janitor would end his career even faster than the machine failure. Maybe we need to think outside the box, he said carefully. What do you mean? I mean, maybe formal credentials aren't the only measure of expertise. Maybe there are people with practical knowledge who could offer fresh perspectives. The board members exchanged glances that mixed confusion with alarm. You're not seriously suggesting we bring in random mechanics, Anais said. This is precision German engineering, not some backyard workshop project. Those random mechanics might see things our engineers missed, Sean argued, though he couldn't explain why he was pushing so hard for something that sounded ridiculous even to him. Absolutely not, Guillermo declared. Our reputation is already damaged by this failure. We cannot afford to look desperate by consulting with unqualified personnel. As opposed to looking competent while our company dies? Sean. Anais' voice carried warning. I understand you're under pressure, but we need rational solutions, not desperation moves. The meeting continued for another hour, circling through the same impossible options. Replace the machine and lose their contracts. Keep trying with experts who had already failed. Consider bankruptcy and liquidation. Nobody mentioned the woman in the gray uniform who mopped floors around the machine every night, who had predicted the compressor failure with startling accuracy, who might hold the key to saving them all. Because nobody wanted to believe that intelligence could exist without proper credentials. That solutions might come from unexpected sources. That sometimes the people with the least formal education understood the most about how things actually worked. After the board members left, Sean remained in the conference room, staring out at the factory floor where the machine sat like an expensive tombstone. His phone buzzed with messages from his father, from clients, from reporters who had somehow learned about Pollard Industries' crisis. His assistant knocked on the door. Mr. Pollard? There's someone here to see you about the machine problem. Another consultant? Not exactly. It's the night janitor. Scarlett Webster. She says she might be able to help. Sean's pulse quickened. After their conversation the night before, he'd found himself thinking about her prediction regarding the compressor. About the quiet certainty in her voice when she'd spoken about machines telling stories to those who listened. Send her away, he said automatically. This isn't the time for. But what if it was exactly the time? What if desperation was the only thing that could make him see past his own prejudices? Actually, he said, send her in. Scarlett stood in the conference room doorway, still wearing her gray janitor's uniform. The bright orange cleaning cart beside her looked absurd against the polished wood and leather furniture, like a splash of working-class reality in an executive fantasy. Mr. Pollard, I know this sounds crazy, she began. Everything sounds crazy at this point, Sean interrupted. What do you think you know about our machine? I know what's wrong with it. The words came out in a rush, as if she'd been holding them back for days. Third-stage drive system. Bearing assembly misalignment. Installed incorrectly during original setup. The computer shows normal operation because the sensors can't detect microscopic tolerances, but the machine knows. That's why it shut down. It's protecting itself. Sean stared at her. The explanation was more detailed than anything the 100 engineers had offered. How could you possibly know that? Because I listened to what it's telling me. Scarlett stepped into the room, leaving her cart behind. I've been cleaning around that machine for 6 months. I know every sound it makes, every vibration, every change in its rhythm. It's been telling me something was wrong for weeks. You're telling me that you, a janitor with no engineering degree, have diagnosed a problem that stumped experts from 6 countries? I'm telling you I can fix it. Her voice grew stronger. Give me 10 minutes with that machine, and I'll have it running better than it ever has. Sean felt the world shift around him like tectonic plates realigning. Either the woman standing before him was delusional, or everything he believed about qualifications and expertise was fundamentally wrong. That's impossible, he said. So is a machine that defeats 100 engineers, Scarlett replied. But here we are. The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and doubt. Outside the conference room windows, the factory floor waited for a decision that would determine whether Pollard Industries lived or died. Scarlett Webster, in her gray uniform with calloused hands and no credentials, offered salvation. All Sean Pollard had to do was trust her. The silence in the conference room stretched like a taut wire. Sean Pollard stared at Scarlett Webster, his mind racing through calculations of risk and reputation. 100 engineers had failed. His company was hemorrhaging money. His career hung by a thread. And a janitor was offering to save them all. 10 minutes, Scarlett repeated, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. That's all I need. This is insane. Sean ran his fingers through his hair, destroying the careful styling that had once seemed so important. If word gets out that we let a janitor work on an $8 million machine. Word's already out that 100 engineers couldn't fix it, Scarlett said quietly. How much worse can your reputation get? The brutal honesty hit him like cold water. She was right. Pollard Industries was already the laughingstock of the manufacturing world. Every trade publication would carry the story, century-old company stumped by single machine. His father's legacy was crumbling while he sat paralyzed by convention. What exactly would you do? He asked. Remove the housing on the third-stage drive system. Realign the bearing assembly. Replace 2 worn components that are creating vibration resonance. She spoke with the calm precision of someone who had visualized the repair 100 times. The parts cost maybe $40 total. And if you're wrong, if you damage something, then you're exactly where you are now, except $40 poorer. Scarlett stepped closer to the conference table. Mr. Pollard, I know you don't trust me. I know this sounds impossible. But that machine is dying while we argue about credentials. Sean's phone buzzed with another message from his father. Another client asking questions. Another reporter requesting comment on the Pollard Industries crisis. Each buzz felt like a nail in the coffin of everything 3 generations had built. The board would fire me immediately if they found out. Only if I fail. Scarlett's dark eyes met his directly. What if I succeed? The question hung in the air like smoke. What if she succeeded? What if this woman with no degree and no credentials accomplished what the world's experts couldn't? The implications would shatter every assumption about intelligence, education, and who deserved to be heard. I need witnesses, Sean said suddenly. If we're doing this, I need people to document what happens. Engineers who can verify the repair methods, confirm that it wasn't just luck or coincidence. Fine by me. And if this goes wrong, if you damage the machine further, you take full responsibility. Pollard Industries cannot be held liable for decisions made by unqualified personnel. Something flickered across Scarlett's face, hurt or anger, but her voice remained steady. I understand. Sean picked up his phone and sent 3 quick messages. Within minutes, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Carter Christian and Mac Keith entered the conference room, both looking exhausted from 4 days of fruitless diagnostics. You wanted to see us? Carter asked, then noticed Scarlett. Why is maintenance here? Because she thinks she can fix the machine, Sean said. The 2 engineers exchanged glances that mixed amusement with disbelief. Sir, with all due respect, Mac said carefully, we've had the best minds in the industry working on this problem. German specialists who helped design the original system. If they couldn't solve it. They couldn't solve it, Sean interrupted. 100 engineers, 4 days, 0 results. Miss Webster thinks she knows what's wrong. Miss Webster is a janitor, Carter pointed out. Miss Webster predicted the compressor failure 3 days before it happened, Sean replied. While you were running diagnostics on systems that showed normal operation. Carter's face flushed. The compressor incident had been embarrassing enough without having it thrown back at him by the company's CEO. What exactly is she proposing? Mac asked. Scarlett repeated her diagnosis, describing the bearing misalignment and vibration resonance in plain language that somehow conveyed more understanding than days of technical jargon from certified experts. Third-stage drive systems are incredibly complex, Carter said when she finished. The tolerances are measured in thousandths of an inch. One mistake could destroy the entire assembly. Then don't make any mistakes, Scarlett replied simply. This is ridiculous, Carter muttered, but his protest lacked conviction. 4 days of failure had shaken his confidence in conventional wisdom. Ridiculous or not, we're doing it, Sean decided. Miss Webster, you have your 10 minutes. Gentlemen, you're here to observe and document everything that happens. At the factory floor, the German machine dominated the production floor like a sleeping giant, its silence more ominous than any alarm. Scarlett approached it with the reverence of someone entering a cathedral, her cleaning cart replaced by a small toolkit borrowed for maintenance. Where did you get those tools? Carter asked suspiciously. Maintenance department. Basic hand tools. Nothing fancy. Scarlett set the toolkit beside the machine and placed her palm against the metal housing. The gesture looked almost mystical to the watching engineers. What are you doing? Mac asked. Listening. Scarlett closed her eyes, her hand moving slowly across the surface. Machines talk if you know how to hear them. This one's been in pain for months. Carter started to object, then stopped. Something in her posture, the certainty of her movements, made his protests die in his throat. Scarlett opened the access panel with practiced efficiency, her hands moving to exactly the right latches without hesitation. Inside, the machine's mechanical heart revealed itself in all its German precision. Gears and bearings and actuators arranged with microscopic accuracy. There! She pointed to a bearing assembly deep within the mechanism. See how it's sitting? The German technicians installed it 0.2 millimeters off-center. Not enough to trigger error codes, but enough to create harmonic vibration that's been wearing the components for 6 months. Carter squinted at the assembly, pulling out a magnification device from his toolkit. After a moment, his eyes widened. She's right, he said quietly. The alignment is off. Not by much, but... He looked at Scarlett with new respect. How did you see that? Same way you know when your car needs an oil change, Scarlett replied, already removing the bearing assembly with gentle precision. The machine tells you. Mac moved closer, watching her hands work. Her movements were economic, purposeful, guided by instinct rather than manual instructions. She removed components in an order that made perfect sense once you saw it, though it differed completely from the manufacturer's recommended sequence. This bearing's worn beyond tolerance, she said, holding up a piece of metal that looked perfect to the untrained eye. And this actuator spring has metal fatigue from the constant vibration. She reached into her toolkit and produced 2 replacement parts. Where did you get those? Carter asked. Ordered them last week from the parts supplier. Charged them to maintenance budget. Scarlett's hands continued working while she spoke. I've been watching this machine die for months. Figured somebody would eventually need these parts. You ordered replacement parts based on your own diagnosis? Mac's voice carried grudging admiration. Without authorization. $43 out of a $12,000 monthly maintenance budget. I didn't think anyone would notice. She reassembled the bearing assembly with the new components, her movements flowing like a pianist playing a familiar piece. No hesitation, no reference to manuals or diagrams. Her hands simply knew where everything belonged. Realignment next, she muttered, making microscopic adjustments with tools that seemed too crude for such precise work. Germans are brilliant engineers, but they overthink sometimes. This machine doesn't need computer-guided precision. It needs someone who understands how metal wants to move. Carter and Mac exchanged glances. They'd spent 4 years in engineering school learning about stress analysis and material properties and computer modeling. This woman was talking about metal like it had feelings, and somehow making it sound logical. There! Scarlett stepped back, wiping her hands on a shop rag. Give it a try. Sean had been standing silently throughout the repair, his phone buzzing with ignored messages. Now he approached the machine's control panel with the careful movements of someone expecting disaster. What if it doesn't work? He asked. Then you're exactly where you were 10 minutes ago, Scarlett said. Except now you know for certain that the 3rd stage drive system isn't the problem. Sean pressed the startup sequence. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the machine hummed to life with a sound none of them had heard before. Smooth, harmonious, perfectly balanced. The vibration that had plagued it for months was gone. Status lights flickered from red to amber to green. The diagnostic screen showed optimal performance across all systems. Production cycle indicators climbed to levels the machine had never achieved. "Impossible," Carter whispered. "Not impossible," Scarlett said quietly. "Just different from what you expected." The machine settled into its normal production rhythm, but the sound was transformed. Where before it had run with mechanical efficiency, now it purred with the contentment of precision machinery operating within perfect tolerances. "How long did that take?" Mac asked, checking his watch. 8 minutes and 37 seconds, Sean replied, his voice hollow with disbelief. They stood in silence, listening to the machine run better than it ever had. 8 minutes. After 4 days of expert consultation, hundreds of thousands in consultant fees, and a parade of credentials that filled conference rooms. Fixed by a janitor with $43 in parts and hands that understood what textbooks couldn't teach. "Miss Webster," Sean said finally. "Yes, sir. We need to talk." In the conference room, Scarlett sat across from Sean in the same chair where she'd been rejected 6 months earlier. But everything else had changed. Carter and Mac flanked her like converts to a new religion, their earlier skepticism replaced by awestruck respect. "How?" Sean asked simply. "I don't know how to explain it in engineering terms," Scarlett admitted. "I just understand machines. Always have. My grandmother used to say I had a gift, but gifts don't pay bills or get you hired without proper papers." "The repair technique you used," Carter said. "It's not in any manual I've studied. Where did you learn it?" "Nowhere. The machine showed me what it needed." Scarlett looked around the conference room, seeing it differently now. "I know that sounds crazy." "Crazy is spending 4 days failing at something you accomplished in 8 minutes, Mac replied. Sean leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling. Everything he believed about qualifications, about education, about who deserved opportunities, had been shattered by a woman in a gray uniform with calloused hands and no credentials. "What do we do now?" he asked. "That depends," Scarlett said. "Are you ready to admit that intelligence doesn't always come with diplomas?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Outside the conference room windows, the factory floor hummed with renewed productivity. Orders would be filled. Clients would be satisfied. The company would survive. All because someone finally listened to the person everyone else ignored. The question lingered in the conference room like incense, heavy and transformative. Sean Pollard stared at Scarlett Webster, seeing her fully for the first time since that April morning when he dismissed her as unqualified. The woman who had just saved his company sat calmly in her gray uniform, waiting for his answer. "I need to understand," he said finally. "How does someone develop this level of expertise without formal training? Where did this gift come from?" Scarlett's fingers traced the edge of the polished conference table, her expression growing distant. "It started with my grandfather's garage in Corktown. I was maybe 5 years old, and he'd let me sit on his workbench while he fixed neighborhood cars. He never taught me anything directly, just let me watch and listen." She paused, memory softening her features. Grandpa Joe had these massive hands, scarred from 40 years of factory work, but he could diagnose engine problems just by sound. He'd stand in the driveway, eyes closed, while someone started their car 3 blocks away. "That Buick needs new spark plugs," he'd say. Or, "Mrs. Johnson's transmission is slipping again." Carter leaned forward, fascinated despite himself. "He taught you to listen like that?" "He never taught me anything with words," Scarlett replied. "But I'd watch him work, and somehow I just knew what he knew. When I was 7, I told him the Henderson station wagon had a cracked distributor cap. He checked, and I was right. He looked at me like I'd performed magic." "What did he say?" Mac asked. "Nothing at first. Just smiled and ruffled my hair. But later that night, I heard him talking to my grandmother. That child's got the gift, Rose. She can hear what machines are saying." Scarlett's voice grew quiet. "Grandma Rose said it was a blessing. Grandpa Joe said it might be a curse if the world wasn't ready for a little black girl who understood engines better than grown men." The words settled over the room like a shroud. Sean felt something twist in his chest, recognizing the truth in her grandfather's prediction. "What happened to your grandfather?" Sean asked gently. "Heart attack when I was 12. Same week my parents died." Scarlett's voice didn't waver, but her hands stilled on the table. "Car accident on I-75. Brake failure that should never have happened if anyone had been paying attention to what the car was trying to say." The silence that followed was profound. Carter shifted uncomfortably in his chair, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You could have prevented it," he said softly. "Maybe. I was just a kid, but I knew that car was sick. The brakes felt spongy when Dad drove me to school. The engine made noises that meant trouble was coming." Scarlett met his gaze directly. "I tried to tell them. Kids don't know about brake fluid leaks and worn rotors, but I knew something was wrong. They said I had an active imagination." "Jesus," Mac whispered. "After the funeral, I went to live with Grandma Rose. She was 73 and cleaned office buildings downtown for $8 an hour. We had nothing except the house in Corktown and my strange gift for understanding machines." Scarlett's voice grew stronger. "I dropped out of high school at 16 to work full-time. Grandma Rose was getting sick, and we needed the money." "What kind of work?" Sean asked. "Whatever I could find. Factory floors mostly, where they needed someone to keep old equipment running. I couldn't explain how I knew what was wrong with machines, so I learned to keep quiet and fix things when nobody was watching." A bitter smile crossed her face. "Supervisors would take credit for repairs I made. Said they'd trained me well." Carter's engineering degree suddenly felt less impressive. "How long did you do that?" 9 years. Until Grandma Rose died last March, and I lost the factory job when Morrison Manufacturing closed." Scarlett looked around the conference room, taking in the polished wood and leather chairs that represented a world she'd never been invited to join. "I applied here because I was desperate. Rent doesn't pay itself, and unemployment benefits don't last forever." "But you knew you were overqualified for janitorial work," Sean said. "Overqualified according to who?" The question carried years of accumulated frustration. "I can fix machines that stump experts, but I don't have a piece of paper saying I'm smart enough to try. I can diagnose problems by sound and touch, but that's not real engineering according to the world that matters." She stood and walked to the window overlooking the factory floor, where the German machine hummed with perfect harmony. "You know what's funny? For 6 months, I've cleaned around that machine every night. I've watched your engineers struggle with problems I could solve in my sleep. I've bitten my tongue until it bled, because who's going to listen to the cleaning lady?" "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" Mac asked. Scarlett turned from the window, her expression mixing pain with resolve. "Because I've spent my whole life watching people dismiss what they don't understand. Because I've learned that being right doesn't matter if you don't have the right credentials. Because I've seen brilliant mechanics ignored while incompetent engineers get promoted based on their diplomas." The words hit Sean like physical blows. He thought about the interview 6 months ago, how quickly he'd dismissed her despite her obvious passion. How he'd offered her janitorial work as a cruel joke, never imagining she might actually possess the expertise she claimed. "The compressor failure," he said suddenly. "You predicted it during your interview." "I could hear it struggling from the parking lot. The refrigerant lines were corroded, creating back pressure that stressed the motor. Basic maintenance could have prevented it, but nobody was listening to what the machine was trying to say." "And you've been watching our equipment fail for 6 months?" "Not just watching. Documenting." Scarlett returned to her chair and pulled out a small notebook from her uniform pocket. "I've been keeping track of every problem I've observed, every repair that could prevent future breakdowns, every inefficiency that's costing you money." She opened the notebook, revealing pages of neat handwriting in blue ink. Diagrams of mechanical systems drawn with surprising accuracy. Maintenance schedules that showed deep understanding of equipment lifecycle management. Carter reached for the notebook, studying the entries with growing amazement. This is incredibly detailed. You've identified problems we don't even know we have yet." "Like what?" Sean asked. "Production line 2 has bearing where that will cause failure within 3 weeks," Scarlett recited from memory. The hydraulic system on line 4 has a slow leak that's reducing efficiency by 12%. The main air compressor needs valve replacement before it damages the motor. How can you know all this? Mac demanded. Because I listen. Because I pay attention. Because machines don't lie to you if you know how to hear them. Scarlett's voice grew passionate. Your engineers look at diagnostic screens and computer readouts. I listen to the sound of metal under stress, feel vibrations that mean trouble is coming, smell the difference between normal lubrication and fluid that's breaking down. She stood again, energy coursing through her like electricity. You want to know where my expertise comes from? Comes from 17 years of survival. From learning that my gift was the only thing standing between me and poverty. From watching my parents die because nobody listened to what their car was trying to say. The conference room fell silent except for the distant hum of machinery that now seemed to carry new meaning. Each sound told a story to those who knew how to listen. Show me, Sean said suddenly. Show you what? The other problems you've identified. If you're right about this machine, if you've been documenting issues for 6 months. He stood, decision crystallizing in his mind. Show me what else we're missing. Scarlett glanced at Carter and Mac, uncertainty flickering across her face. You want me to walk through the factory and point out problems? I want you to do whatever you've been doing for 6 months, except this time we're going to listen. Mr. Pollard, Carter said carefully, if she's wrong about these other issues. She wasn't wrong about the German machine, Sean replied. She wasn't wrong about the compressor. At what point do we admit that maybe our definition of expertise needs updating? Scarlett closed her notebook and tucked it back into her pocket. There's one thing you need to understand first. What's that? I'm not going to sugarcoat what I tell you. I'm not going to use diplomatic language to protect anyone's feelings. If your equipment is failing because of poor maintenance or operator error or engineering mistakes, I'm going to say so plainly. Her voice carried the steel of someone who had spent too many years staying silent. Are you prepared for that kind of honesty? Sean thought about his father's phone calls, about board meetings filled with excuses and finger-pointing, about a company culture that prized credentials over competence. Yes, he said. I think brutal honesty is exactly what we need. Scarlett smiled for the first time since entering the conference room, the expression transforming her face completely. Then let's go find out how much trouble you're really in. As they prepared to leave the conference room, Sean realized that everything was about to change. Not just the mechanical problems she'd identify, but the fundamental assumptions about intelligence and expertise that had guided his company for 40 years. The woman in the gray uniform was about to teach them all what it meant to truly listen. And once they started hearing what the machines were trying to say, there would be no going back to comfortable ignorance. The walk through Pollard Industries' production floor became a revelation that shattered everything Sean thought he knew about his own company. Scarlett moved through the machinery like a doctor making rounds, her trained ear catching problems that million-dollar diagnostic equipment had missed. Stop here, she said beside production line 2, placing her hand against a massive stamping press. The machine operated normally to untrained eyes, its rhythm steady and productive. But Scarlett's expression grew concerned. What do you hear? Carter asked, genuinely curious now rather than skeptical. Listen to the third compression cycle. Right, there. Scarlett pointed to a specific moment in the machine's operation. Hear that slight catch? The main bearing is wearing unevenly. Metal fatigue from improper lubrication 3 months ago. Mac pulled out his tablet and checked the maintenance records. This machine passed its monthly inspection 2 weeks ago. All systems showed normal operation. Your inspection measures oil pressure and temperature, Scarlett replied. But it can't detect microscopic scoring on bearing surfaces or the harmonic frequency changes that indicate wear patterns. She knelt beside the machine's base, her ear close to the housing. This bearing will fail catastrophically within 3 weeks. When it does, it'll take out the drive shaft and probably crack the main housing. Repair costs will run about $60,000, plus 2 weeks of downtime. Versus replacement costs now? Sean asked. $400 for the bearing, maybe 6 hours of labor. Scarlett stood, brushing dust from her uniform. But you'd need to schedule downtime during the weekend shift change. Carter was already making notes on his tablet, his earlier resistance replaced by professional fascination. How can you be so specific about the timeline? Because metal talks when it's dying, Scarlett said simply. This bearing is telling me exactly how much life it has left. They moved to production line 4, where Scarlett stopped beside a hydraulic control system. The unit operated quietly, its gauges showing normal pressure and flow rates. 12% efficiency loss, she announced. Slow leak in the secondary pressure line is forcing the pump to work harder, increasing energy consumption and reducing system lifespan. Mac checked his diagnostic equipment. All readings are within normal parameters. Your readings measure gross system pressure. They can't detect gradual efficiency degradation caused by minor leaks. Scarlett pointed to a section of piping hidden behind other equipment. The leak is there, probably at a joint that wasn't properly sealed during installation. She was right. When Carter crawled behind the machinery with a flashlight, he found a thin film of hydraulic fluid on the floor, evidence of the slow leak that had escaped detection for months. This is extraordinary, he said, emerging from behind the equipment. You've identified problems our diagnostic systems completely missed. Your diagnostic systems measure what engineers think is important, Scarlett replied. But machines don't always fail in ways that textbooks predict. The tour continued through the factory, each stop revealing new problems hiding in plain sight. A conveyor system with bearing where that would cause catastrophic failure within days. An air compressor running 20% over capacity due to leaks in the distribution system. A cooling unit with refrigerant loss that was slowly damaging the entire production line. Jesus Christ, Sean muttered as the list of problems grew. How much is all this going to cost to fix? About $30,000 in parts and labor, Scarlett calculated. But if you wait until these systems fail on their own, you're looking at maybe $400,000 in repairs and lost production. Why didn't anyone else catch these problems? Because you've trained your engineers to trust instruments over instincts, Scarlett said bluntly. Diagnostic equipment can only measure what it's designed to detect. But machines communicate in dozens of ways. Sounds, vibrations, smells, temperature variations, harmonic frequencies. Most people have forgotten how to listen. They paused beside the main air compressor, a massive unit that provided pneumatic power for the entire factory. Scarlett placed both hands on its housing, her expression growing serious. This one's more complicated, she said. The valves are failing, but it's not mechanical wear. Someone's been running it outside design parameters for months, probably to meet increased production demands. Sean felt heat rise in his face. He'd pushed for higher production numbers throughout the summer, demanding that every system operate at maximum capacity. How much damage? He asked quietly. Valve seats are scored, probably beyond rebuild limits. Main motor is showing stress fatigue from constant overload. Scarlett met his eyes directly. This compressor has maybe 2 weeks left before complete failure. When it goes, your entire factory shuts down. Replacement cost? $120,000 for a new unit, plus installation. But more importantly, you'd be down for at least 10 days while waiting for delivery and setup. The weight of her words settled over the group like a storm cloud. 10 days of downtime would cost more than the compressor itself. There's something else, Scarlett continued. The electrical system feeding this compressor is overloaded. The wiring wasn't designed for the amperage you're drawing. I can smell insulation breakdown from here. Carter immediately pulled out his electrical meter and began checking circuits. Within minutes, he confirmed dangerous overload conditions that could cause fires or equipment damage. This is a safety hazard, he said grimly. We should shut down immediately. Not necessarily, Scarlett said. You can reduce the load by fixing the air leaks throughout the distribution system. That'll drop power consumption by maybe 25%, enough to get you through until you can upgrade the electrical service. How do you know about electrical systems? Mac asked. I thought your expertise was mechanical. Mechanical systems don't exist in isolation, Scarlett replied. Everything's connected. Electrical problems cause mechanical failures. Pneumatic issues affect hydraulic systems. You can't understand one without understanding all of them. By the time they'd completed the factory tour, Scarlett's notebook contained a comprehensive list of problems that would have cost the company millions if left unaddressed. But more than that, she demonstrated a level of systematic thinking that impressed even the skeptical engineers. "I need to ask you something," Sean said as they returned to the conference room. "How do you organize all this information? How do you keep track of dozens of systems and their interconnections?" Scarlett sat down, suddenly looking tired. "The same way you remember faces or phone numbers. It just sticks. Every machine has its own personality, its own way of telling you what's wrong. Once you learn to listen, you can't forget what you've heard." "That's not normal," Carter said, not accusingly but with genuine wonder. "No, it's not," Scarlett agreed. "My grandmother always said I was different. Other kids played with dolls or video games. I took apart radios and washing machines, trying to understand why they worked the way they did." "What did your teachers think?" Mac asked. "I dropped out in 10th grade, remember? But before that..." She smiled ruefully. "They thought I was a troublemaker, always questioning why we learned formulas without understanding what they meant. Always wanting to take things apart instead of just memorizing facts." "Kinesthetic learning," Carter said suddenly. "You need to touch and manipulate things to understand them." "I need to feel how they work, yes. Books and diagrams never made sense to me, but give me a broken engine and I can understand its problems in minutes." Sean leaned back in his chair, his mind reeling from the afternoon's revelations. This woman possessed a type of intelligence that formal education hadn't just failed to recognize but had actively discouraged. How many other brilliant minds had been dismissed because their gifts didn't fit conventional molds? "Scarlett," he said carefully, "what would it take to keep you here? Not as a janitor, but as... I don't know what to call it. Industrial diagnostician? Mechanical systems analyst? You're offering me a job? I'm asking what it would take to create a position that matches your abilities." Scarlett was quiet for a long moment, her fingers drumming on the table. "Respect," she said finally. "Not just from you, but from the engineers who'd work with me. I can't do my job if people spend all their time questioning my credentials instead of listening to my findings." "That's reasonable," Sean said. "And autonomy. I need to be able to examine any system I think is problematic, without having to justify every decision to committee reviews." Her voice grew stronger. "If I tell you something needs immediate attention, you need to trust that I know what I'm talking about." "Also reasonable. One more thing." Scarlett met his gaze directly. "I want to mentor other people like me. People with practical intelligence who've been dismissed by the formal education system. This company needs to stop measuring competence by diplomas and start recognizing talent wherever it exists." Carter and Mac exchanged glances. The implications of what she was proposing would revolutionize their hiring practices. "You're talking about changing our entire approach to engineering," Carter said. "I'm talking about recognizing that intelligence takes many forms," Scarlett replied. "Some people understand systems through books and formulas. Others understand them through hands-on experience. Both types of thinking are valuable." "What about salary?" Sean asked. "What do you pay Carter?" "I can't discuss another employee's compensation." $72,000, Carter said, surprising everyone. "Plus benefits and performance bonuses." "Then that's what I want," Scarlett said simply. "Equal pay for equal contribution." The room fell silent as the magnitude of what was happening settled over them. 6 months ago, Scarlett Webster had been rejected for an entry-level position. Now she was negotiating terms for a role that would make her one of the highest-paid technical employees in the company. "I'll need to discuss this with the board," Sean said. "Of course. But while you're discussing it, that air compressor is still dying, and those bearing failures are still coming." Scarlett stood, smoothing down her gray uniform. "The machines don't care about corporate politics. They just keep breaking down while people argue about who's qualified to fix them. She walked toward the door, then paused. Mr. Pollard? Thank you for finally listening. It's been a long time since anyone wanted to hear what I had to say. As she left the conference room, Sean realized that everything had changed. Not just for Scarlett, but for all of them. They discovered that intelligence couldn't be measured by degrees alone, that wisdom often came from unexpected sources. The woman in the gray uniform had taught them how to listen. Now they had to decide whether they were brave enough to hear what she'd been trying to tell them all along. The Detroit Free Press article hit like a sledgehammer to the chest. Scarlett sat in her 15-year-old Honda Civic, engine running for warmth, staring at the headline on her phone screen. Pollard Industries admits janitor knows more than engineers. The story had leaked overnight, spread across social media like wildfire. By morning, every major trade publication was running variations of the same humiliating narrative. The comment section made her stomach churn with their mixture of racism, sexism, and professional outrage. Typical affirmative action nonsense. What's next? Letting the cafeteria workers perform surgery? This is what happens when companies prioritize diversity over competence. Her hands shook as she scrolled through the responses, each one a knife twist of everything she'd endured her entire life. 26 years of proving herself, of being dismissed, of watching lesser minds succeed because they had the right skin color and credentials. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Honey, there's reporters outside your building. Might want to use the back entrance. Reporters. The story had grown legs, become entertainment for a world that loved to mock companies for their failures. Scarlett Webster, the brilliant janitor who embarrassed 100 engineers, had become a punchline. She turned off the engine and sat in the parking lot of Pollard Industries, watching employees hurry past her car without recognition. A week ago, she'd been invisible. Now she was infamous, and somehow that felt worse. The emergency board meeting buzzed with panic and recrimination. Sean sat at the head of the conference table, facing 12 angry faces that held him responsible for the public relations disaster consuming their company. Stock price dropped 8% overnight, announced board member Guillermo Moss, his voice sharp with accusation. Our clients are questioning our competence. The Michigan Engineering Association issued a statement calling our actions professionally irresponsible. How did this story leak? Demanded Anai Glover. Who talked to the press? It doesn't matter how it leaked, Sean replied wearily. What matters is how we respond. We respond by distancing ourselves from this fiasco immediately, Guillermo snapped. Issue a statement clarifying that Miss Webster's contributions were overstated, that our engineering team deserves credit for the machine repair. You want me to lie? I want you to protect this company's reputation. Guillermo leaned forward, his face flushed with anger. 40 years your father spent building Pollard Industries into a respected name. Are you going to destroy his legacy because of some feel-good diversity story? Sean felt heat rise in his chest. This isn't about diversity. It's about competence. Scarlett Webster saved this company. Scarlett Webster is a janitor with no credentials, Anai said coldly. Whatever she contributed, it was under the supervision of qualified engineers. Carter Christian and Mac Keith guided her through the repair process. That's not what happened, and you know it. It's what happened according to our official statement, Guillermo declared. Miss Webster assisted our engineering team in resolving a complex mechanical issue. Any suggestion that she acted independently or possessed superior knowledge is inaccurate. I won't sign a statement that denies what she accomplished. Then maybe you're not the right person to lead this company through a crisis, Anai said quietly. The words hit Sean like a physical blow. Board members around the table nodded their agreement, their faces showing no sympathy for his position. Are you threatening my job? We're questioning your judgment, Guillermo replied. First you authorize an unqualified person to work on critical equipment. Then you allow damaging publicity that makes us look incompetent. Now you're refusing to take necessary steps to protect our reputation. Our reputation should be based on results, not credentials. Our reputation is based on client confidence, Anai corrected. And right now, Our clients are asking whether they can trust a company that admits its janitors no more than its engineers. Sean's phone buzzed with a text message. Carter Christian, need to talk. Urgent. I need 5 minutes, Sean said, standing from the table. Sit down, Guillermo ordered. We're not finished. Yes, we are. Sean walked toward the door. I won't throw Scarlett under the bus to save face. If that costs me my job, so be it. Carter and Mac waited beside the German machine, their expressions grim. The equipment hummed with the perfect efficiency Scarlett had restored, but the sound felt mocking now against the backdrop of corporate crisis. What's so urgent? Sean asked. Carter held up his tablet, showing an email. We just received this from the Michigan Professional Engineers Association. They're launching a formal investigation into unauthorized engineering work performed by unlicensed personnel. What does that mean? It means they could recommend sanctions against any licensed engineer who supervised or endorsed Miss Webster's work, Mac explained. Including us. Sean felt the walls closing in around him. They can do that. Professional licensing boards take unauthorized practice very seriously, Carter said. If they determine that we allowed unlicensed engineering work to proceed without proper oversight, we could face disciplinary action. Suspension, fines, even permanent license revocation. But she fixed the machine. She saved the company. That doesn't matter to the licensing board, Mac said. They're concerned with protecting the integrity of the engineering profession. Meaning they're concerned with protecting their monopoly on technical expertise. Sean, I need to ask you something directly, Carter said. Are you prepared to risk our careers for this? Because right now, Mac and I are looking at potential professional destruction. Our licenses are how we feed our families. The question hung in the air like smoke. Sean understood what they were really asking. Was he willing to sacrifice their livelihoods for principle? What do you want me to do? Issue a clarifying statement, Mac said. Make it clear that Miss Webster worked under our direct supervision, that we guided every aspect of the repair. Emphasize that all critical decisions were made by licensed professionals. Even though that's not true. It's not entirely false either, Carter said defensively. We were present during the repair. We documented the process. Technically, we did supervise her work. You supervised nothing. You watched in amazement while she accomplished something you couldn't. Carter's face flushed. Look, I respect what she did. I think she's incredibly talented. But I also have a mortgage and 2 kids in college. I can't lose my license over this. Sean stared at the 2 men who had become believers in Scarlett's abilities, now backing away from her under institutional pressure. He couldn't blame them for protecting their careers, but their retreat felt like betrayal nonetheless. Fine, he said finally. Draft your statement. I'll review it. Relief flooded their faces. Thank you, Mac said. This is the right decision. Is it? Because right now, it feels like cowardice. The knock on Scarlett's door came with the authority of bad news. She opened it to find Sean Pollard standing in the narrow hallway of her apartment building, his expensive suit looking out of place among the peeling paint and worn carpeting. Mr. Pollard, I wasn't expecting you. May I come in? Scarlett stepped aside, acutely aware of her small apartment's shabby furniture and thin walls. Sean entered carefully, taking in the modest space where she'd lived her quiet life before everything exploded. I suppose you've seen the news, he said. Kind of hard to miss. Scarlett gestured toward her laptop, still open to news articles about the janitor engineer story. My 15 minutes of fame. I'm sorry. The leak wasn't authorized. Someone on the board must have talked to reporters. Someone who wanted to embarrass you, you mean? Scarlett closed the laptop and faced him directly. What do you need, Mr. Pollard? Sean struggled with how to begin. The board is demanding that we issue a clarifying statement. Something that adjusts the narrative about what happened with the machine repair. Adjusts how? By emphasizing the role of licensed engineers in supervising your work. Making it clear that you didn't act independently, that all critical decisions were made by qualified professionals. Scarlett felt something cold settle in her stomach. In other words, you want to lie. I want to protect the people who supported you. Carter and Mac are facing potential license revocation. The engineering board considers what happened to be unauthorized practice. So you're throwing me under the bus to save their careers. I'm trying to find a solution that protects everyone. Everyone except me. Scarlett walked to her window, looking down at the street where reporters had gathered earlier. Let me guess. The statement will describe me as a helpful assistant who followed instructions from real engineers. Something like that. And what happens to the job offer? The position we discussed, the salary, the respect. Sean's silence was answer enough. I see. Scarlett turned back to face him, her expression hardening. So when it was convenient, when your company was dying, my abilities were valuable enough to consider me for a senior position. But when there's political pressure, suddenly I'm just a janitor who got lucky. That's not fair. Fair. Scarlett's voice rose for the first time. Fair would have been getting hired 6 months ago based on my abilities instead of being offered janitorial work as a joke. Fair would have been recognition for saving your company instead of being turned into a publicity problem. The situation is complicated. No, it's simple. You need someone to blame for your public relations disaster, and the black woman without credentials makes a convenient scapegoat. I'm trying to protect you too. If this investigation continues, you could face legal consequences for practicing engineering without a license. I was practicing being intelligent, Scarlett shot back. Since when is that a crime? They stared at each other across the small apartment, the fragile bond they'd built cracking under institutional pressure. What do you want me to do? Sean asked quietly. I want you to tell the truth. I want you to stand up for what actually happened instead of bowing to professional politics. Scarlett's voice grew stronger. I want you to be the man I thought you were becoming instead of the coward you've always been. The words hit Sean like physical blows. If I don't issue this statement, the board will fire me. The investigation will destroy Carter and Mac. The company could face lawsuits. And if you do issue it, you'll destroy the one person who saved your company. You'll send a message that intelligence doesn't matter if it doesn't come with proper papers. Scarlett opened her apartment door. But I guess that's acceptable collateral damage. Scarlett, please. Help me find another way. There is no other way. You either support me or you don't. You either believe in what we accomplish together or you sacrifice it to save face. Sean walked toward the door, then paused. What if I refuse to issue the statement? What if I fight the board and the investigation? Then you'll probably lose your job, Carter and Mac will lose their licenses, and your company will suffer. Scarlett met his gaze directly. But you'll be able to look at yourself in the mirror. That's not much comfort when everyone's unemployed. No, Scarlett agreed. But it's something. After he left, Scarlett sat alone in her apartment, listening to the sounds of the city through thin walls. Mrs. Patterson's baby was crying again. Cars passed on the street below. Life continued around her while everything she'd briefly hoped for crumbled into dust. She'd been invisible for 26 years. Now she understood that brief visibility had been an illusion, a momentary break in the clouds before the storm returned with doubled fury. Tomorrow, she'd be a janitor again. Or more likely, unemployed entirely. But tonight, she'd been right. And somehow, that would have to be enough. Sean Pollard sat in his pristine kitchen, staring at the draft statement on his laptop screen. The words blurred together as he read them for the 100th time, each sentence a careful construction designed to protect careers while destroying truth. Miss Webster provided valuable assistance to our licensed engineering team during the recent equipment repair. All technical decisions were made under proper professional supervision, ensuring compliance with industry standards and safety protocols. The statement was legal, defensible, politically expedient. It was also a lie. His phone buzzed with another message from his father. Board meeting at 2 p.m. Be ready to sign the statement and move forward. This situation has gone on long enough. 40 years. That's how long his father had spent building Pollard Industries from a small machine shop into a regional manufacturing powerhouse. 40 years of careful reputation management, strategic relationships, and playing by established rules. Sean was about to destroy it all for a woman he'd dismissed as unqualified 6 months ago. The kitchen door opened, and his wife Patricia entered wearing her morning exercise clothes, hair pulled back in a perfect ponytail that somehow never showed sweat despite her daily 5-mile run. "You're up early," she said, moving to the coffee maker with practiced efficiency. "Couldn't sleep." "The board meeting?" Sean nodded. Patricia had been briefed on the situation, though he'd omitted the more damaging details. She understood there was a personnel issue that required delicate handling. "What will you tell them?" she asked. "I don't know." Patricia turned from the coffee maker, studying his face with the analytical precision she applied to everything. 20 years of marriage had taught her to read his moods like financial statements. "This is about more than a public relations problem, isn't it?" Sean met her gaze, seeing the woman who'd supported his career ambitions, who'd managed their social connections, who'd built the perfect executive wife persona because she believed in the life they'd constructed together. "What would you do if you discovered that everything you believed about success was wrong?" he asked. "I'd question whether that discovery was accurate or whether I was having a crisis of confidence." Patricia poured 2 cups of coffee, adding cream to his without asking. "Successful people don't usually achieve success by accident, Sean. There are reasons why certain standards exist. And if those standards exclude people who are more capable than the ones they protect, then those people need to meet the standards. That's how systems work." She handed him his coffee, the gesture carrying years of routine comfort. "You can't change fundamental rules because one person claims to be an exception." What if she's not claiming to be an exception? What if she's proof that the rules are fundamentally flawed? Patricia sat across from him at the breakfast table, her expression growing concerned. "Sean, you're talking about undermining the entire professional credentialing system. Engineering licenses exist to protect public safety. You can't just ignore them because someone without credentials happened to get lucky." "It wasn't luck, Patricia." She diagnosed problems that 100 licensed engineers missed. She fixed a machine they couldn't repair. She's identified millions of dollars in potential equipment failures that our experts never detected. Under supervision. No. Independently. Using knowledge that she somehow possesses despite never attending engineering school. Patricia was quiet for a moment, sipping her coffee while processing what he'd told her. "What exactly are you considering doing?" she asked finally. "Telling the truth. Refusing to sign the statement. Supporting Scarlett's abilities regardless of what it costs. And when the board fires you, when we lose the house, the lifestyle, everything we've built." Her voice remained calm, but tension crept into her posture. "When your father's company fails because his son chose principle over pragmatism?" The questions hit their target. Sean thought about their mortgage, their country club membership, their children's private school tuition. The comfortable life built on his position as heir to a family business. "Maybe some things are more important than comfort," he said quietly. "Easy to say when you've never lived without it." Patricia stood, her coffee barely touched. "I married a man who understood how to succeed in the real world. Don't become someone who throws away everything for an idealistic crusade." She left the kitchen, her footsteps echoing on the hardwood floors of their expensive home. Sean remained at the breakfast table, surrounded by symbols of success that suddenly felt hollow. Carter Christian sat behind his desk, reviewing the statement he'd helped draft. The words seemed reasonable, professionally appropriate, designed to protect everyone involved while minimizing damage to the company's reputation. So why did he feel like he was betraying everything he'd learned to believe about engineering? A knock on his office door interrupted his thoughts. Mac Keith entered, carrying a folder of paperwork and wearing the expression of someone wrestling with uncomfortable truths. "The licensing board wants to interview us next week," Mac said without preamble. "About our supervision of Miss Webster's work? About whether we properly supervised unauthorized engineering practice." Mac sat down heavily. "They're not just questioning what happened. They're questioning whether we failed in our professional responsibilities. Carter leaned back in his chair, feeling the weight of institutional pressure. What do you think we should tell them? The truth, I suppose. That we watched a woman with no formal training accomplish something we couldn't. That's not going to help our case. No, it's not. Mac was quiet for a moment. Carter, can I ask you something honestly? Sure. Do you think we're doing the right thing? With this statement, I mean. Carter had been wrestling with the same question since yesterday. His engineering training had taught him to value systematic analysis, peer review, evidence-based conclusions. Everything about Scarlett's abilities contradicted those principles. But the results didn't lie. I think we're protecting our careers, he said finally. That's not what I asked. It's the only answer that matters right now. Carter gestured toward the statement on his desk. The licensing board doesn't care whether Scarlett is brilliant. They care whether we followed proper protocols. And we didn't. Because proper protocols would have prevented us from accessing the solution we needed. Exactly. Which means the system is more interested in maintaining control than solving problems. They sat in uncomfortable silence, both men recognizing the implications of what they'd acknowledged. What if we refuse to sign the statement? Mac asked quietly. We lose our licenses. Our families suffer. Scarlett still gets thrown under the bus, but now we're unemployed too. And if we sign it, we keep our jobs, preserve our professional standing, and live with knowing we abandoned someone who saved our company. Some choice. Carter thought about his mortgage, his children's college funds, his wife's medical insurance. 20 years of career building that could disappear if he chose principle over pragmatism. The system is bigger than we are, he said finally. Fighting it won't change anything except our employment status. Maybe. Or maybe that's what people always say when they're about to do something they know is wrong. Scarlett sat on her couch, laptop open to job search websites that seemed to mock her with their credential requirements. Bachelor's degree required. Engineering license preferred. 5 years relevant experience minimum. Every posting told the same story. Intelligence didn't matter if you couldn't prove it on paper. Her phone rang. Unknown number with a local area code. Hello, Miss Webster? This is Dr. Rebecca Foster from Wayne State University's College of Engineering. I hope you don't mind me calling directly. Scarlett straightened, surprised. How did you get my number? I've been following the news coverage of your work at Pollard Industries. I was hoping we might have a conversation about your experiences. What kind of conversation? The kind where we discuss how someone with your obvious abilities might pursue formal recognition of their knowledge. Wayne State has programs designed for working professionals, alternative pathways to engineering credentials. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline. Formal education. Legitimate credentials. A path toward the recognition she'd always been denied. That would take years, Scarlett said. 3 years for a bachelor's degree if you test out of prerequisite courses. Given your demonstrated abilities, I suspect you could challenge many of the required classes. And then what? I'd be 40 years old with an entry-level engineering degree. You'd be 40 years old with the credentials to match your abilities. No one could ever question your qualifications again. Scarlett thought about the reporters outside her apartment, the hostile comments on news articles, the professional investigation that treated her competence like a crime. Would that really solve anything? Or would I just be another credentialed engineer in a system that values paper over performance? Dr. Foster was quiet for a moment. That's a fair question. But the alternative is remaining outside a system that, fairly or not, controls access to the work you're clearly born to do. What if the system is wrong? What if the problem isn't that I lack credentials, but that credentials have become more important than actual ability? Then changing the system would require people with both ability and credentials to challenge it from within. Dr. Foster's voice carried gentle persistence. You can't reform something you can't access. After hanging up, Scarlett stared out her apartment window at the Detroit skyline. Somewhere in those buildings, Machines were breaking down while credentialed experts missed obvious solutions. Problems were going unsolved because the people with answers weren't allowed to speak. She could spend 3 years earning the right to be heard. Or she could find another way to make her voice matter. The choice felt impossible, like choosing between surrender and futile resistance. But as she sat in her small apartment, listening to the sounds of a city full of problems that needed solving, Scarlett Webster realized she'd already made her decision. She just had to find the courage to follow through. Sean entered the conference room where his future would be decided, carrying the unsigned statement and the weight of impossible choices. Board members filled the polished table, their faces showing the impatience of people accustomed to quick solutions. His father sat at the far end of the table, 73 years old and still commanding despite his age. The man who'd built everything now watched his son prepare to destroy it. "Gentlemen, ladies," Sean said, taking his seat. "I've reviewed the proposed statement." "Excellent," said Guillermo Moss. "Let's sign it and move past this embarrassment." Sean set the unsigned document on the table, his heart hammering against his ribs. "I can't sign this." Silence filled the room like poison gas. "Excuse me." Anai Glover's voice carried deadly calm. "I won't lie about what Scarlett Webster accomplished. She saved this company, and she deserves recognition, not betrayal." "Sean," his father said quietly, "don't destroy everything for misguided principle." "Dad, she's brilliant. More capable than any engineer we've ever employed. If we abandon her now, we're saying that politics matter more than performance." "Politics do matter more than performance," Guillermo snapped. "This is business, not charity. We protect our interests, not our feelings." Sean looked around the table at faces that had hardened against him, realizing that his choice would define not just his career, but his character. The woman who'd saved them all waited for his decision. And finally, after 40 years of playing by other people's rules, Sean Pollard knew exactly what he had to do. The silence in the conference room stretched like a held breath. Sean Pollard stood at the head of the polished table, facing 12 board members whose expressions ranged from shock to fury. His unsigned statement lay before him like evidence of betrayal. "You're making a mistake," his father said quietly. 40 years I've built this company's reputation. Don't destroy it for someone who doesn't even have a high school diploma." "She has something better than a diploma, Dad. She has the ability to solve problems that stump experts." Sean's voice grew stronger with each word. "And if we throw her away to protect our image, we deserve whatever happens to us." "The board will vote you out," Anai Glover warned. "Effective immediately." "Then that's a risk I'll have to take." Guillermo Moss leaned forward, his face flushed with anger. "You're destroying a legacy for a janitor who got lucky one time." "She wasn't lucky. She predicted equipment failures weeks before they happened. She diagnosed complex mechanical problems that $100,000 diagnostic equipment missed. She saved this company millions of dollars while we questioned her credentials." Sean pulled out his phone and placed it on the conference table. "I'm calling a press conference for 4 o'clock this afternoon. I'm going to tell the truth about what Scarlett Webster accomplished. All of it. You'll be fired before you reach the parking lot," Anai said coldly. "Maybe. But I'll sleep better tonight than I have in months." The boardroom erupted in angry voices, threats, and ultimatums. But Sean was no longer listening. He'd found his answer in the choice between comfort and character, and surprisingly, character felt lighter than he'd expected. He walked out of the conference room while board members shouted behind him, leaving the unsigned statement on the table like a rejected surrender. Scarlett pushed her cleaning cart through the production floor, past machinery that hummed with perfect efficiency thanks to repairs she'd guided. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was cleaning floors around equipment she understood better than anyone else in the building. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sean. "Press conference at 4 p.m. Main conference room. I need you there." She stared at the message, wondering if this was another attempt to manipulate her into accepting a face-saving compromise. But something in the tone felt different, more resolved than desperate. Carter Christian appeared beside her, his expression troubled. "Scarlett, we need to talk." "About what?" "About the statement we're supposed to sign." About what really happened with the machine repair. He ran his hand through his hair, destroying his usual professional appearance. Mac and I have been discussing it, and we can't go through with the lie. What are you saying? We're saying that watching you work changed everything we believed about engineering. You have abilities that formal education can't teach, and we're not going to pretend otherwise. Mac Keith joined them, carrying a folder of documents. We've prepared our own statement. It describes exactly what happened, gives you full credit for the diagnosis and repair, and acknowledges that our engineering degrees were useless when it mattered most. Scarlett felt something shift in her chest, a cautious hope that maybe she wouldn't face this battle alone. What about your licenses? The investigation? We'll deal with whatever happens, Carter said. But we won't build our careers on lies about your abilities. Why the change of heart? Max smiled grimly. Because we spent the morning trying to justify abandoning the person who saved our company, and we couldn't find any reason that wasn't rooted in cowardice. The press conference drew reporters from across the Midwest, their cameras and microphones turning the conference room into a media circus. Local news stations, trade publications, and social media influencers packed the space, sensing a story that would generate substantial attention. Sean entered the room flanked by Scarlett, Carter, and Mac. The symbolism was intentional, licensed engineers standing beside the woman whose intelligence they finally recognized. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming, Sean began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was about to do. I called this press conference to clarify statements made about recent events at Pollard Industries. Cameras flashed as he continued. 10 days ago, an $8 million piece of manufacturing equipment failed completely. 100 engineers, including specialists from the machine's German manufacturer, were unable to diagnose or repair the problem. Production stopped. The company faced potential bankruptcy. The room was silent except for the clicking of cameras. The machine was repaired in 8 minutes and 37 seconds by Scarlett Webster, a member of our maintenance staff. She diagnosed the problem using mechanical intuition that surpassed every expert we consulted. She performed the repair using $43 in replacement parts. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, recognizing the explosive nature of his admission. Miss Webster possesses extraordinary mechanical intelligence despite having no formal engineering education. Over the past 6 months, she has identified millions of dollars in potential equipment failures that our diagnostic systems missed completely. A reporter raised her hand. Mr. Pollard, are you saying that an untrained janitor knows more about engineering than licensed professionals? I'm saying that intelligence takes many forms, and our industry has been foolish to recognize only one of them. Sean's voice grew passionate. Miss Webster's abilities are real, documented, and invaluable. The fact that she lacks formal credentials is an indictment of our credentialing system, not her competence. What about professional licensing requirements? Another reporter asked. Carter stepped forward. As licensed professional engineers, we want to state clearly that Miss Webster's abilities exceed our own in mechanical diagnostics. She possesses intuitive knowledge that formal education cannot provide. Are you recommending changes to licensing requirements? We're recommending that competence be measured by results, not just credentials, Mac replied. Miss Webster has proven her abilities beyond any doubt. She deserves recognition regardless of her educational background. Miss Webster, a reporter called out, how do you respond to critics who say you're unqualified to perform engineering work? Scarlett stepped to the microphone, her voice clear and strong. I respond by pointing to the machines I've repaired, the problems I've solved, and the money I've saved this company. Competence speaks louder than credentials. What do you want people to understand about your abilities? I want them to understand that intelligence exists in many forms. Some people learn from books and lectures. Others learn by listening to what machines are trying to say. Both types of knowledge are valuable, and both deserve respect. What's next for you professionally? Scarlett glanced at Sean, seeing support in his expression. Mr. Pollard has offered me the position of Chief Mechanical Systems Analyst, with full authority to implement predictive maintenance programs and equipment optimization strategies. The announcement sent ripples through the assembled reporters. A janitor promoted to senior management based purely on demonstrated ability. The salary will be commensurate with the value Miss Webster provides, Sean added, which makes her one of the highest-paid technical employees in our company. What about the board of directors? Do they support this decision? Sean's smile carried grim satisfaction. The board voted to terminate my employment this afternoon. Effective immediately, I am no longer CEO of Pollard Industries. Gasps echoed through the conference room. However, I am now the majority shareholder, having purchased controlling interest from board members who valued short-term reputation over long-term competence. He looked directly into the cameras. Miss Webster's promotion stands. Her abilities will be recognized and rewarded regardless of institutional resistance. 6 months later, Scarlett Webster stood in her corner office, reviewing equipment status reports on multiple monitors that displayed real-time data from machinery throughout the facility. Her title was officially Chief Mechanical Systems Analyst, but everyone knew her real role. She was the person who kept Pollard Industries running better than it ever had. The transformation had been remarkable. Equipment downtime was down 60%. Maintenance costs had dropped by half. Production efficiency had reached levels the company had never achieved. Orders were backlogged for months as word spread about Pollard Industries' newfound reliability. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Sean entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the relaxed expression of someone who'd found peace with difficult decisions. "How are the new apprentices working out?" he asked, handing her a cup. "Brilliantly." Scarlett gestured toward the factory floor, visible through her office windows. "Trevor's got natural instincts for hydraulic systems. Bridger understands electrical problems like he was born to it. Neither of them has formal engineering education, but both have the gift." The apprenticeship program had been Scarlett's idea. Identify people with practical mechanical intelligence regardless of their educational background. Train them through hands-on experience rather than classroom theory. Give them pathways to recognition that didn't require traditional credentials. "The university partnership is working well too," Sean noted. "Dr. Foster says Wayne State is redesigning their engineering curriculum based on your recommendations." "About time. Book learning has its place, but you can't understand machines without touching them, listening to them, feeling how they want to work." Speaking of recognition, Sean pulled out an official-looking envelope. "This arrived this morning." Scarlett opened the envelope, revealing an invitation to speak at the American Society of Mechanical Engineers National Conference. "They want me to give the keynote address on alternative pathways to engineering excellence," she read aloud. "Will you do it?" "Of course. Someone needs to tell them that intelligence doesn't always come with proper paperwork." They stood together at the window, watching the factory floor where apprentices worked alongside traditional engineers, where machinery hummed with the contentment of equipment properly understood and maintained. "Any regrets?" Sean asked. "About what?" "About taking the long road to get here. About all those years when nobody would listen." Scarlett considered the question, thinking about her parents' preventable death, her grandmother's faith, the years of invisible labor that had led to this moment of recognition. "No regrets," she said finally. "Every machine I fixed, every problem I solved, every person who dismissed me, it all brought me here. To this office, this position, this chance to prove that competence matters more than credentials. And the critics, the people who still say you're unqualified, they're welcome to come down to the factory floor and try to outperform me." Scarlett's smile carried the confidence of someone whose abilities had been tested and proven beyond doubt. "But they won't, because talent is talent, regardless of where it comes from or how it's packaged." Through the office windows, Detroit stretched toward the horizon, a city built by people who understood that greatness could emerge from unexpected places. And in the heart of that industrial landscape, Scarlett Webster had finally found what she'd always deserved: recognition for the brilliant mind that had never needed credentials to prove its worth. The machines hummed their approval, speaking in the language only she had learned to hear. And for the first time in her life, the world was finally listening. Her life had been reversed, transformed from invisible maintenance worker to celebrated leader. The woman who once mopped floors around machines now commanded respect as the person who understood them better than anyone else alive. Love had come at last, not romantic love, but something deeper. The love of being truly seen and valued for who she really was. And that, Scarlett knew, was worth every difficult step of the journey that had brought her home. Sometimes the most incredible transformations happen when we refuse to accept that our circumstances define our worth. Real intelligence can't be hidden forever, and that courage to stand up for truth can change everything. 2 years later, the second anniversary of the 10-minute miracle found Scarlett Webster standing before 300 engineering students in Wayne State University's largest auditorium. Her navy blue blazer and confident posture bore little resemblance to the woman in the gray janitor's uniform who had once been dismissed as unqualified. 2 years ago today, I fixed a machine that had stumped 100 engineers, she began, her voice carrying easily through the packed auditorium. Not because I was smarter than they were, but because I listened when they couldn't hear. The audience was rapt, hanging on every word. Her story had become legendary in engineering circles, spawning academic papers, case studies, and heated debates about the future of technical education. But what happened after that 10-minute repair matters more than the repair itself. Many of you have wondered what happened to the board members who tried to silence me, Scarlett continued. The answer is simple. The market spoke louder than their prejudices. Within 6 months of the press conference, 3 major clients had switched their contracts to Pollard Industries specifically because of Scarlett's innovations. The company's stock price had doubled. Board members who had demanded Sean's removal found their own positions untenable when shareholders discovered they had opposed the person responsible for unprecedented profits. Guillermo Moss had resigned in disgrace after it emerged that he'd leaked the original story to the press, hoping to embarrass Sean. Anai Glover had lost her seat when pension fund managers questioned her judgment. One by one, the board members who had prioritized reputation over results had been voted out by investors who cared more about returns than credentials. Sean had acquired majority control not through some dramatic financial maneuver, but through patient stock purchases as panicked board members sold their shares during the initial crisis. By the time they realized their mistake, he owned 63% of the company. Cowardice, Scarlett noted, has a way of punishing itself. Carter Christian and Mac Keith faced a formal investigation by the Michigan Professional Engineering Board, she continued. The hearing lasted 3 days and generated national attention. The engineering board had been caught in an impossible position. They could sanction 2 licensed engineers for allowing unauthorized practice, but doing so would essentially punish them for recognizing superior competence. Meanwhile, Scarlett's success had generated headlines that made the entire licensing system look foolish. The final ruling had been a masterpiece of bureaucratic compromise. Carter and Mac received formal reprimands for failing to follow proper oversight protocols, but no suspension or license revocation. The board simultaneously created a new category of exceptional practical expertise that could qualify individuals for supervised engineering work without traditional credentials. Carter is now our vice president of engineering, Scarlett said. Mac heads our new apprenticeship program. Both men chose courage over comfort when it mattered most, and both have been rewarded for that choice. The question of whether Scarlett had illegally practiced engineering without a license had generated a lawsuit that reached the Michigan Supreme Court. The case, Webster v. State Professional Licensing Board, had become a landmark decision that fundamentally changed how technical expertise was legally defined. The court ruled that mechanical repair work, even on complex industrial equipment, did not constitute engineering practice if it was performed under emergency conditions to prevent equipment damage. More importantly, the decision established that licensing requirements could not be used to prevent individuals from demonstrating their competence. The legal system, Scarlett observed, proved more flexible than the professional establishment. Some of you may wonder about the personal costs of standing up for principle, she said, her tone growing more serious. Sean's marriage to Patricia had not survived his transformation. She had filed for divorce 8 months after the press conference, unable to accept the social consequences of her husband's decision to support that janitor woman over established convention. The divorce had been bitter but brief, with Patricia keeping the Bloomfield Hills house while Sean moved to a smaller place closer to the factory. Mr. Pollard lost his wife, his social circle, and his comfortable assumptions about success, Scarlett said. But he gained something more valuable: the knowledge that he had chosen character over convenience when it mattered most. Sean had remarried 6 months ago to Dr. Rebecca Foster, the Wayne State professor who had initially offered Scarlett a path to formal education. Their wedding had been held in the Pollard Industries factory, surrounded by the machinery that had brought them all together. The impact of Scarlett's story had rippled far beyond Detroit. Manufacturing companies across the country began implementing practical expertise programs, hiring maintenance workers and technicians based on demonstrated ability rather than credentials alone. The American Society of Mechanical Engineers had created the annual Webster Award for individuals who demonstrated exceptional engineering competence through non-traditional pathways. 3 major universities had established programs specifically designed for students with hands-on mechanical intelligence. "We didn't just change one company," Scarlett told the students. "We began changing an entire industry's understanding of intelligence itself." Most importantly, Pollard Industries' apprenticeship program had become a model for technical education nationwide. Young people with natural mechanical abilities but limited formal education could now earn living wages while developing their skills under expert guidance. Trevor Richards, once destined for unemployment after high school, now managed hydraulic systems for 3 automotive manufacturers. Bridger Avila had started his own consulting firm specializing in electrical diagnostics. Dozens of other apprentices had found careers that matched their abilities rather than their paperwork. "We proved that talent doesn't require permission to exist," Scarlett said. "And what about me?" she asked the audience. "Did I ever pursue formal education?" The answer was yes, but not in the way anyone expected. Scarlett had enrolled in Wayne State's doctoral program in mechanical engineering, not to gain credentials but to contribute to research on intuitive diagnostic methods. Her dissertation, Mechanical Empathy, Understanding Industrial Systems Through Sensory Integration, had revolutionized the field of predictive maintenance. She had received her Ph.D. the previous spring, summa cum laude, at age 28. The degree was not a requirement for her position at Pollard Industries, but it had given her additional credibility when working with traditional engineers. "I didn't need the degree to prove I was intelligent," she explained. "But having it meant I could speak in academic environments like this one, spreading the message that intelligence takes many forms." Back in Corktown, Scarlett had used her success to establish the Rose Webster Community Workshop, named after her grandmother. The facility provided free mechanical training for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds, focusing on hands-on learning rather than classroom theory. Mrs. Patterson's son, now 4 years old, spent his afternoons at the workshop, showing early signs of the same mechanical intuition that had defined Scarlett's life. She had quietly set up a college fund for him, ensuring that his gifts would never be constrained by financial limitations. "We all have a responsibility to nurture talent wherever we find it," she said. As Scarlett concluded her presentation, she looked out at 300 faces that represented the future of engineering. Some would follow traditional academic paths. Others would discover alternative routes to recognition. All of them would inherit an industry that had learned to value competence over credentials. "The story I've told you today isn't really about me," she said in closing. "It's about what happens when we stop letting artificial barriers prevent us from hearing the solutions we desperately need." After the presentation, a young woman approached the podium. She was perhaps 19, wearing second-hand clothes and carrying herself with the careful posture of someone accustomed to being overlooked. "Miss Webster? I don't have money for college, but I can fix any engine just by listening to it. Is there really a place for someone like me?" Scarlett smiled, remembering a similar conversation she'd had with herself many years ago. "There's not just a place for you," she said. "There's a future waiting for you to build it." Outside the auditorium, Detroit hummed with the sounds of industry and possibility. In factories across the city, machines ran smoothly under the care of workers who had learned to listen with more than their ears. And somewhere in the mechanical harmony, the voice of intelligence itself whispered that competence, finally, had found its recognition. The woman who had once mopped floors around equipment she understood better than anyone had become the teacher who showed others how to understand and fix machines. Her life had been reversed completely. And in that transformation, she had reversed the assumptions of an entire industry. Thank you for staying with me until the very end of this incredible journey. If this story touched your heart, wait until you see what's coming next. It's even more powerful and inspiring than you can imagine. So don't go anywhere. Click on that video showing on your screen right now to dive into another amazing story that will absolutely blow your mind. Trust me, you won't regret it.